You are reading By the Ballot, a Substack from the New South's new generation of Democrats, where we talk about stances, tactics, and news from the left. My name is Matt Royer. The Antifa strawman distraction. How the Trump administration is building a case against the left using false pretenses. Last month, President Trump hosted members of his cabinet and a handful of conservative influencers to warn that Antifa was destroying cities like Portland, Oregon. Chaos, death, and destruction that only the U.S. military could possibly stop. Those documenting on Twitter revealed that most of what was occurring in Portland amounted to a handful of protesters and some folks in inflatable costumes twerking in front of police. What Trump and his MAGA crowd are banking on is that no one will actually pay attention to the work of journalists and activists who are showing this farce for what it is, an over-exaggerated distraction at best and an excuse to use the military on U.S. citizens at worst. Not long ago, Speaker Mike Johnson had this to say about the No Kings rallies planned by Indivisible for October 18th.
Patient guy, but I have had it with these people. They're playing games with real people's lives. The theory we have right now, they have a Hate America rally that's scheduled for October 18th on the National Mall. It's all the pro-Hamas wing and the Antifa people. They're all coming out. Some of the House Democrats are selling T-shirts for the event, and it's being told to us that they won't be able to reopen the government until after that rally because they can't face their rabid base. I mean, this is serious business hurting real people.
Like so much of the right's co-opted vocabulary, Antifa has become a blanket term for anyone demonstrating against Republican authoritarianism, from journalists documenting ICE snatch and grabs to activists defending neighbors from unlawful arrests. It's a pattern we've seen before. They claim rampant crime from undocumented immigrants, so they paint every migrant as MS-13. They talk about lazy people gaming Medicaid, so they slash healthcare for millions. They cherry-pick one accused individual who identifies as a trans woman to brand all trans women as predators. Each straw man is a setup for cruelty, a caricature built to justify punishment. So, who are these masked men who are seemingly terrorizing the very hearts and minds of the MAGA faithful? Why do their antics cause these Mar-a-Lago patrons to clutch their pearls with their very lives? And what are Trump and his crew actually up to with stunts like these roundtables? What is Antifa? Let's start with the basics. You've heard it spouted many times out of the mouth of prominent Republicans and conservative talking heads. Their favorite gang of masked boogeymen clad in black bloc that somehow orchestrated the mass chaos during the Black Lives Matter rallies, the January 6th insurrection, and the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Antifa. But what is Antifa? Despite what the geniuses in the GOP claim, Antifa isn't an organization. It doesn't have a leader, a headquarters, or central command. Even Trump's own former FBI director, Christopher Wray, admitted it's not a group or organization, it's a movement, an ideology. Antifa is short for anti-fascistisch, German for anti-fascist, and traces its lineage to anti-fasciste Aktion, a grassroots coalition founded in 1932 by members of the Communist Party of Germany to resist Hitler's rise to power. That movement itself was inspired by the anti-fascisti groups that emerged in Italy in the mid-1920s, formed by socialists, anarchists, and labor organizers in opposition to Mussolini's Partito Nazionale Fasciste. So yes, the people who literally fought Nazis in Mussolini's black shirts are somehow the bad guys now. In the US, Antifa is a decentralized network of activists with anti-authoritarian, anti-fascist, and anti-racist beliefs. Many who organize against ICE, police brutality, or far-right extremism fall under its umbrella, often labeled Antifa by the right whether or not they identify that way. Their tactics range from nonviolent direct action, protests, community organizing, mutual aid, to a small fringe that engages in digital activism, doxing, or property damage. The through line, confronting fascism head-on. The modern American Antifa movement traces its roots to anti-racist action in the 1980s, but it was Trump's election in 2016 that gave it new prominence, especially after Charlottesville in 2017 and during the 2020 protests after George Floyd's murder. Contrary to right-wing punditry and GOP talking points, most anti-fascist groups plan for de-escalation, not violence. Their work looks a lot more like handing out water and legal hotlines than breaking windows. So what were Trump and his cabinet really talking about on October 8th? Roundtable meeting for very smart and very serious people. On Wednesday, October 8th, Donald Trump convened a roundtable of cabinet officials, including DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, Attorney General Pam Bondi, and FBI Director Kash Patel, alongside right-wing independent journalists like Andy Ngo, Nick Sortor, Katie Daviscourt, and others. The entire spectacle was theater, part disinformation session, part loyalty test. This is what Secretary Kristi Noem had to say about a decentralized movement that literally has no leadership structure.
This network of Antifa is just as sophisticated as MS-13, as TDA, as ISIS, as Hezbollah, as Hamas, as all of them. They are just as dangerous. They have an agenda to destroy us, just like the other terrorists we've dealt with for many, many years. And today is the day that we have a president that won't tolerate it and will stand up and fight for the American people.
Noem intentionally cited organizations formerly designated as terrorist entities to fit the GOP's ongoing narrative, echoing the president's executive order aimed at labeling Antifa a domestic terrorist organization, despite the fact that no such legal mechanism exists in U.S. law. She even claimed at one point that they had the girlfriend of one of the founders of Antifa in custody in Portland and were trying to prosecute her. Unless that woman is a 100-year-old Italian anti-fascist, Noem was either lying or making someone a patsy to score political points. President Trump and his top lieutenants vowed to use the full weight of the federal government to combat Antifa with the same force used against drug cartels and foreign terrorists. At one point, Attorney General Pam Bondi declared,
"We're not going to stop at just arresting the violent criminals we can see in the streets. Fighting crime is more than just getting the bad guy off the streets. It's breaking down the organization brick by brick. Just like we did with cartels, we're going to take the same approach, President Trump, with Antifa. Destroy the entire organization from top to bottom. We're going to take them apart."
That statement was followed by Patel pledging this from the FBI.
What we are doing at the FBI is simple. It does not require rocket science. We are following the money. Money never lies. And that's what it's going to take to bring down this network of organized criminal thugs, gangbangers, and yes, domestic terrorists, because that's what they are. They are harming everyday citizens in every single one of our communities. And the folks you see here on the right and left, they're some of the bravest men and women we have today. They're reporting the stories live time because the mainstream media won't cover it. They're putting their lives on the line. They're standing up for the flag. The least we can do is stand up for them. So you have my thanks. I read more of your stories than I do theirs because you guys are putting out the truth. And we deserve a country where you are protected as equally as they are. We, in this FBI, will go after with the criminals with a vengeance. We will not rest until we find every single seed, money, donor, organization, and funding mechanism that we have.
If you've been paying attention, this fits neatly into the Trump administration's new playbook. Use domestic terrorism as a pretext to target political opponents financially, legally, and organizationally. The administration has already used airstrikes against alleged cartel boats off of the Venezuelan coast. Now they're floating the same approach towards protesters and activists at home. The October 8th meeting wasn't about Antifa at all. It was about building a legal and rhetorical foundation to go after left-leaning donors and organizations under the guise of counterterrorism. It was the latest attempt to turn fear into justification for repression, and the press conference that followed was the first draft of their propaganda campaign, grasping for those straw men. Trump came in hot to his second term with one goal in mind: dismantling Democratic and leftist-aligned organizations, primarily through financial warfare. His allies in Congress have already floated investigations into Act Blue and hinted at audits of liberal-leaning nonprofits. It's part of a broader campaign to criminalize opposition under the guise of national security. Following the assassination of Charlie Kirk, an alleged link to the left, the right-wing agitator Laura Loomer tweeted, "The best way President Trump can reinforce Charlie's legacy is by cracking down on the left with the full force of the government." She has since deleted this tweet. So how does this connect to their obsession with blaming everything on Antifa? It's the same playbook we saw 2 decades ago. Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld needed a reason to invade Iraq, so they created one: weapons of mass destruction. Trump and his administration are now searching for their own WMD moment, something they can point to as a justification for targeting left-wing organizations and donors powering the movement against them. It's easy to create a monster when the public doesn't have the access to the whole picture, especially when that confusion is intentional. Trump and his allies have built up Antifa into a shadowy, omnipresent super threat by accusing it of everything from burning down Seattle and Minneapolis after George Floyd's murder, to instigating the January 6th attack, to orchestrating assassination attempts on Trump himself. They've even tried to link the killers of Minnesota Speaker Melissa Hortman and Charlie Kirk to supposed Antifa sympathies. The point isn't the truth, it's fear. When the President of the United States and his cabinet label a non-existent organization as the root of domestic terrorism, it opens the door to extraordinary measures, surveillance, prosecution, and political purges. Many observers have noted that the October 8th roundtable focused more on laying the groundwork for future policies than on the policies themselves. Trump and his team are already deploying the National Guard in cities like Los Angeles, D.C., Portland, and Chicago, claiming they're protecting ICE agents from Antifa terrorists, even though the people confronting those agents have been mainly journalists, neighbors, and elected officials protecting their constituents from unlawful detentions. When demonstrators object to those overreaches, the administration calls them paid agitators. Because in Trump's worldview, no rational person could oppose authoritarianism. There must always be a villain, a puppet master, a George Soros behind the curtain. And sure enough, Trump took to Truth Social in August to demand
George Soros and his wonderful radical left son should be charged with RICO because of their support of violent protests and much more, all throughout the United States of America.
It's part of a deliberate strategy to conflate Democrats, leftist movements, and even the fundamental protest rights with terrorism. A way to fold the entire opposition into one imagined enemy. It's lazy, dangerous, but effective. Because if they can convince the public that Antifa and the left are interchangeable, then suddenly every donation, every protest, and every critical voice becomes aiding and abetting domestic terror. That's not law enforcement, that's fascism with paperwork. The path of the money. Following the October roundtable, Reuters published a damning report exposing what many had already suspected. The Trump administration has developed an explicit plan to use the full force of the federal government against left-wing organizations, all under the guise of countering domestic terrorism. According to the report, Trump's senior advisor, Stephen Miller, is helping to lead the effort, which involves deploying America's counterterrorism apparatus, the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Justice, IRS, and Treasury Department to investigate and potentially dismantle groups accused of funding or organizing political violence. 2 weeks after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, Trump issued National Security Presidential Memorandum 7, or NSPM 7, or the Countering Domestic Terrorism and Organized Political Violence Directive, if you're nasty. The order directs the National Joint Terrorism Task Force, created by the Patriot Act in 2002 after 9/11, to focus on domestic terrorists whose ideologies include anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, and anti-Christianity. While a White House official claimed the directive remains focused on violence and illegal activity, Trump's own rhetoric tells a different story. When asked who could be funding these domestic terrorists, he didn't hesitate. He said George Soros and Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn and a prominent Democratic donor who famously bailed out NGP Van last year. In almost direct contradiction to the official line, the White House later named 9 liberal groups and donors it claimed helped finance or plan protests where violent incidents occurred. The list included Act Blue, Indivisible, the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, and the Open Society Foundations. Administration insiders say the task force is exploring several tools to defund or shut down these groups, including IRS investigations to strip nonprofits of their tax-exempt status, criminal probes by the DOJ and FBI, surveillance programs under DHS authority, and the use of RICO statutes and anti-terror laws to target donor networks and financial partners. The logic is chillingly simple. Paint left-leaning donors as terror financiers, then use national security powers to neutralize them. It's not just suppression, it's financial warfare. Presidential historian Timothy Naftali told Reuters,
Trump and Nixon share the same desire to punish political enemies and silence critics, but the difference is that today's Congress and cabinet are enabling him to go further. That's why this moment is far more dangerous for the rule of law than the 1970s ever were.
Trump has made no effort to hide his vindictive streak. He's repeatedly said that disloyal or anti-American entities will face the consequences. And now through NSPM 7, he's found a legal framework to carry out those threats. One that fuses political persecution with national security. This is the authoritarian dream realized. Punish your enemies, bankrupt your critics, and use the law itself as the weapon. And when you follow the money, you find the real story. Not about Antifa or terrorism, but about power, punishment, and control. But it still begs the question. If they are against the anti-fascists, what does that make them? President Trump and his allies will stop at nothing to take down anyone who dares oppose their inhumane acts or the authoritarian takeover of our government. His appetite for punishment is endless and his methods increasingly lawless. While Democrats and the left find themselves navigating this treacherous ground, we must remember that the Constitution still grants us the right to speak, to organize, and to resist. We must educate ourselves and one another legally and civically to defend those rights, like the lawyer who joined protesters demonstrating against law enforcement in Chicago.
Do not understand what state law you are invoking. Please be clear in your instructions. These peaceful protesters are exercising their First Amendment right. They do not understand your order. They do not understand your statements. You, state troopers, are an unlawful assembly right now because you're impinging on our First Amendment right to free expression. We do not understand your instructions. You have weapons. We do not have weapons. You are invoking, you appear to be threatening violence. We're not threatening violence. You are exacerbating the tension. We are lowering the tension. We don't understand what you're doing. We don't understand why you're doing it. We don't understand how to comply with your orders. You said to disperse. Where do you want us to go? Why can't we exercise our First Amendment rights?
This administration is betting that fear will keep us quiet. We have already seen what comes next when that fear takes hold. Peaceful protesters snatched off the streets, journalists assaulted by federal agents, and activists branded as terrorists for defending their neighbors. And now Trump is preparing to use the full weight of the state, the FBI, IRS, DHS, and DOJ, to bankrupt and imprison his political enemies. As horrifying as that is, it's also clarifying. It reminds us that this fight has always been about more than politics. It's about power, who wields it, and who suffers under it. So yes, it's scary as hell. But we've been here before. We have inherited the legacy of the anti-fascists who stood against the brown shirts of the 1930s, the civil rights organizers who faced down segregationists, and the activists who risked everything to make sure America lives up to its promises. And while it feels dark right now, we are not powerless. We still have each other. So find your team, take care of each other, and keep fighting the good fight. Thank you for reading By the Ballot. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share on Substack, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Also, if you live in the Commonwealth of Virginia, please remember to get out and vote for our Democratic nominees for governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general before the November 4th election. In-person early voting has already begun and will keep going until the Saturday before the election on November 4th. And of course, you can vote at your local polling place on November 4th. Please get out and vote. This is one of the most consequential elections of our lifetime, and I mean that. Everyone is watching Virginia, and as they say, as goes Virginia, so goes the nation. Thank you.